I'm with Joe Swinson, the author of this magnificent book, Equal Power and How You Can Make It Happen. How's it come?
Well, it's gone pretty well. I've been really, it really fulfills a dream that I had when I was 10 years old, when I wanted to be an author. And then I ended up wanting to be in business. And then I wanted to be a politician, which I am. I'm an MP and a deputy leader of the Lib Dems.
Which is a big deal.
Which is a big deal.
So surely with that, a lot of people will go, oh my God, she's this hot shot. I'd better behave, or I'd better not make her angry. Do people now that your status has so changed and dreams have come true, do people treat you differently? Do you find that?
So I'd say probably less so in my role as deputy leader of the Dems.
Right.
But I did find when I was a government minister, and therefore I was in a position of executive power, there was definitely an element whereby people treated me differently, and I noticed that both when I became a minister and when I stopped being a minister. And I think it's quite interesting in terms of power in our society and how it rests and how people respond to it, and of course where it lies. And power in our society is very unequally distributed between men and women. So it was unusual for me to be a woman and a minister, particularly to be a young woman and a minister and to have a baby while I was in office. My oldest son is nearly 5.
And also to take, are you the first woman to take your baby into Parliament?
So yes, Gabriel came into Parliament, into the House of Commons on a debate on how to make it easier for MPs who are parents. And that was at the beginning of September, and I'm back on parental leave now. But I was doing some work for a few weeks. But Gabriel had to come in and be fed, and I had him with me, and he fell asleep on me, and I had to go back into the end of the debate to hear the final speeches. And I thought, well, I'm not going to wake a sleeping baby. And so he was the first baby in the House of Commons during a debate.
Wow.
And you didn't make noise at that point. So that was quite a success. That was great.
Right. I mean, I know in church that some priests can scowl. Other priests can absolutely love having the baby there. And I wonder whether it's the same in workplaces, in Parliament, because this is life.
Well, exactly. And there are definitely circumstances, and there's parts of my job that, it would be entirely inappropriate to take him to. And there's times when it's difficult. But I think that's the other thing. It's about, particularly, do you have proper leave? So for MPs, there's nobody else doing your job when you're on maternity leave.
Yeah.
So if I was to go to something in my constituency at a time when I'm, as a breastfeeding mum, needing to be with my baby, then, that's the kind of choice that becomes quite difficult, that often if you take the baby with you, you can do both things. But yeah, it is one of the difficulties, how to, it's not, for an MP, it's not the hardest. Oh, that is a good little crying face. Yeah. Are you saying, Mummy, you're not giving me attention? Yeah? Oh, dear. Yeah, but you're quite looking at Sarah then, aren't you? I wonder if the little monkey that was in the bag, we might be able to get hold of and see if the little monkey gets this little monkey to be quiet.
Is it as simple as that? Is it distraction?
A lot of it's distraction, but it varies. They can cry when they're hungry, when they're tired. He's probably not tired or hungry because he slept and fed quite recently.
Do you know the different cries, or does that change over time?
So yeah, the hungry cry is the one you get pretty used to at the beginning, and that one is quite like a foghorn would be the way I would describe it. It's like you cannot ignore and you cannot distract from hunger. But then there's boredom and there's general grumpiness and tiredness and
So at 10 you wanted to be an author.
Yeah.
And the book's out and doing well.
Yeah.
Is it true that at 17 you wanted to be an MP?
Well, at 17 I joined the Lib Dems.
You joined. You got the ball rolling.
I didn't necessarily want to be an MP at that point, but I did start getting more involved in politics and started going to party conferences and being involved in the voluntary Lib Dems. I got involved in the youth and student organisation, and then one thing led to another, and then someone said, why don't you stand for Parliament? And so I thought, well, that could be quite good fun.
And how old were you then?
Well, when I decided to stand, I was 20.
Wow.
You had to be 21 to stand. So
Right.
I happened to have my 21st birthday 3 months before the 2001 election. So I was one of the youngest candidates in the country at that time.
Wow.
And so I was elected, not that time, because I stood in a seat against John Prescott. I wasn't going to win. But 4 years later, I did get elected in my home seat of East Bartonshire.
And does it feel different because it is your home seat?
Yeah, definitely.
It's your people.
It just, it's where I've got all the kind of memories from growing up, and that
It's
just means you just understand the area and you know it. Although that said, I mean, within my constituency, there's sort of 4 main towns, and obviously the one that I grew up in, I know very well. And when I first started being a candidate, I had a lot more to kind of learn about the other parts of the constituency. But obviously, having now represented it since 2005, apart from 2 years when I lost my seat in 2015, I obviously know the whole area now. But it's always important to get out there and speak to people because things change, new issues come forward, and people's concerns change from year to year as well.
And would you say with the book that there are specific issues that you wanted to address or deal with or air? And is there some sort of a purpose thread lurking with your life story so far?
Well, with the book, I really wanted to empower people. I wanted people to understand how they can make a difference, and that everybody can take action and can do something. And the problem with gender inequality is so huge, and it's really easy to feel defeated by it, and as if there's nothing you could possibly do as an individual to make a difference.
Yeah.
But what I also saw when I was the government minister for women was lots of individuals making a difference. The 17-year-old schoolgirl who got the A-level music curriculum changed to include women composers for the first time, for example.
Wow.
And individual managers in organisations that have made a real difference to the promotion of women and pay policies. Helena Morrissey, who was the chief exec of Newton, who through their sponsorship of the women's boat race, the Oxford-Cambridge boat race, just made a big stride for equality. So, it doesn't really matter whether you're in a powerful position or whether you're an individual who wants to change the way in which companies advertise things. There are many, many stories of people who have got in touch with a company that has perhaps a sexist advert, or in the case of some of the retailers that advertised to teenage girls, had mannequins that are sort of unhealthily thin, and that people have got in touch, they've challenged it, and change has happened as a result. So it's really about trying to encourage people to take action and to make change.
And is there a certain thing that you would say that you're a champion of, or a part of your story that you just thought, I need to put this right?
So, I mean, when I was a government minister, and I also had my first baby, I was putting forward the shared parental leave policy, which is all about dads, and making it easy for parents to make a choice about how they split the time that they take as leave when their child is born, and or even when they're teething. And basically, that was my proudest achievement in government.
That's something.
And it makes it easy. Well, it makes it possible. It's still very difficult for many reasons, culturally and economically. But it makes it possible for both mums and dads to take significant time off work. And I think that's really important. I mean, I did a whole TED talk about the importance of fathers.
Yeah.
And I think that dads have an incredibly important role to play.
I was astounded at how many men do take paternity leave. I thought, great, it's there. I didn't expect so many men to run with it. Absolutely amazing. And okay, let's check out Wifey's questions. So, how can people live it? I mean, I know one of the last questions there is, since I first met you, my whole focus has changed in that I've been running men's groups for 16 years. It's done a lot of good for, not just mental health, but even suicidal issues, but very basic, healthy, growing, talking issues. And now my thing is, I want to train people and pass it on. I want to take it into the NHS, I want to take it into councils, I need funding, I need publicity.
Yeah.
I want to pass it on. So I have a thing that I wish to pass on now.
Yeah.
How would you say this empowers people to pass on the goodness? Is it the goodness of community? Is it self-empowerment across the classes as well as the sexes?
Well, what I've tried to do is outline the challenges in terms of gender equality across a whole range of areas of society, from politics to the workplace, to parenting, to the culture, the books we read, the films we see, even starting at the very earliest days of a baby's life. The stereotypes that are there in childhood are really significant. The way in which we as a society look at the male and female body, and in particular the way the female body is sort of scrutinised, and the whole issue of violence, which particularly negatively impacts on women and girls. And there is a real epidemic of that. So I try to set out all of those problems, and then at the end of every chapter outline some solutions of things that people can do.
Right.
And it's not about you should do everything in every chapter, it's about people finding, well, here's the thing that I care about most.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I can do. Here's the bit that makes sense. And also, it's not an exhaustive list, so it's a menu of ideas, really.
It sounds like it's changing the perspective of, I'm a victim to this, to, if this is what's going on, have you thought about this? And this might be your next steps.
Yeah.
It's really interesting what you say about the shape of a woman's body in the media, because I've been doing a little bit of research on BDD, body dysmorphia.
Yeah.
And we're running mini workshops at the Gentleman's Grooming Show, and we've called them Men Flirts. But it's nothing to do with flirting, and it's everything to do with being authentic, being who you are, and letting that come through. And then I thought, well, it's at the Gentleman's Grooming Show. It's all about the outside.
Yeah.
And this is all about the inside, because you can dress everything up, you can do whatever to your beard, your hair, and your clothes. But it's the twinkle in the eye that comes through, and surely that's the most irresistible bit. So I thought, well, there's the inside and the outside. And through my research, I think it was 2014 that they totally changed the shapes and sizes of Barbie dolls.
Yes, they did do a big change of Barbie dolls.
I
Absolutely.
had no idea.
Well, they've not changed the main Barbie doll, but they have introduced other shapes and sizes and skin colours and hair types to recognise the diversity of beauty, basically. But when you're only giving one narrow, particular view of what beauty is, then it's not surprising that that's what girls grow up thinking that they need to conform to. And it's also a problem for men.
Totally.
There's more pressure, I think, on women and girls, but it is also there for men and boys, and increasingly so. This aim for perfection. And for men, what the perfect is different. It's not about being, very skinny with big boobs, unsurprisingly, but the whole kind of muscular idea. My goodness me.
Is it just attention?
You want a bit of attention, don't you? That's it. And that's fair enough, isn't it? Plus a little bit of teeth. Yeah.
When does teething happen? Or is it totally individual?
It takes forever. So there's no teeth yet.
I love biscotti.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I have memories of loving Farley's rusk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you remember those?
Yeah, I do, and now it seems to be race cakes. It seems to start, and you have kind of, chewing of fingers and dribbling for months before you eventually find a tooth emerges, and then they have to get 20 of them. So you end up, quite a lot of Calpol in the middle of the night. Is your friend for taking away that pain. A bit of Bonjela on those gums, and all sorts of teething rings, and But it's.
I cannot imagine how you manage. It's unreal. Do you do things like Twitter and all the social media as well as, because you must do a lot of media stuff?
Well, I'm not doing much media at the moment because of Gabriel. And interestingly, I normally do my Twitter, but I'm on a social media break at the moment.
Good for you. What's it like?
It's lovely, actually. It's really nice.
Yeah.
So I read this book called 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now by Jan Lehner, and it was just really good. I don't think I'm going to delete them, but I basically stopped Twitter and Instagram for my period of, well, I've started stopping it for a month, and actually that month has already passed and I've not felt the need to go back on, so I might not be back on until December or the new year. So
good for you.
But yeah, I feel like I've got more time, despite the fact that obviously I'm looking after a baby, so
Yeah.
I don't have very much time.
But that's human time. Where
Yeah,
I kind
exactly.
of find like screen time or
Yeah.
anything with typography,
Yeah.
I feel cheated.
Yeah.
It's-
Well, except for books. I mean,
Yeah.
you never
Electronic
regret time reading a book.
Yeah.
But sometimes the books that we're reading are board books. Yeah.
Yeah, so going back to Barbie,
Yeah.
apparently they didn't change Ken or G.I. Joe
That's interesting.
or any of those exactly the same. And it's a huge issue, it's a huge industry. for
Yeah.
men. Must look like, I spoke to a 21-year-old who told me at the age of 17, yes, at the age of 17 he had a girlfriend and she was beautiful. And from that stage he thought, right, she is above my league, so already at this stage we're talking about leagues. I had better be drop dead gorgeous. I'll starve myself, I will do exercise, I will take this, I will do that. And it's all about that competition. Meanwhile, I've got a client who said his 14-year-old said, what are abs? And he looked really worried, like, what's wrong with me? I haven't got abs.
Yeah.
It's absolutely shocking.
And when you look at things like amongst teenage boys, stuff like steroid abuse and the impact that has, organ failure, really significant health impacts. And so it's a different ideal that is there, but it is still a powerful one. And we basically end up with a generation of young people that feel that they're somehow not right the way that they are, and that they have to then do something drastic to their body, and whether that's extreme dieting, whether that's extreme exercise, whether that's use of steroids or diet pills that can also be really bad, and in some cases obviously cosmetic surgery, and there's been a massive boom in cosmetic surgery.
There's a lot of it about it. It's amazing, absolutely amazing.
And really, when you think about that is about largely, people feeling that they're not adequate as they are.
Yeah.
And what lies behind that is something which it's not easy to draw a simple causal relationship, but there's no doubt that the culture that we live in and all of those influences has an impact on that self-esteem, if you like.
Yeah.
And there's some really interesting, particularly about girls, research that the Girl Guiding Association does, and it just shows you year on year all of those concerns that primary school girls, secondary school girls have, and it's one of their sort of top concerns, and you kind of want those girls to be thinking about their school life and having fun with their friends and developing those relationships.
Rather than being good enough.
Yeah, rather than how they change their body. So I think there is a lot that needs to be done there.
And the hilarious thing so many men have said to me is, as they age, they realise that the big muscles and the big arms, it doesn't work for the girls. And a lot of it is, how do I get the respect of other blokes? Or how can I distract the women with this body and then never find out that I'm scared or I don't have much of a personality? It's a very, very strange one.
Yeah.
So let me have a quick scan through. What have we... I'll tell you what I was going to ask about. What was it like being the Minister for Women, and what would you say the necessity was for... Because there's been a Minister for Women for a long, long time, and there still isn't a Minister for Men. What's that about, and do we need a Minister for Men?
Well, it's an interesting question. So, I think there's been a Minister for Women because more of gender inequality negatively impacts women and girls, though I absolutely recognise there's parts that negatively impact men and boys, and I think there's an increasing awareness of that. So, we've got International Men's Day, which now has a regular debate in Parliament, just like International Women's Day does, and that's absolutely right. And I'm not taking part in it this year, but I did last year, and I think it is really important that these issues are aired and discussed, and one of the ways that could happen is perhaps through a minister for men. I think there's quite an interesting thing really, which is gender inequality issues seem to almost sometimes rely on women in political terms to raise them.
Yeah.
So, if you look at your men's mental health, crisis effectively that we're in with, the suicide being the biggest killer of men under the age of 45.
Yeah.
If you look at the way that men are sort of written out of the script when it comes to parenting, if you look at, industrial accidents and health and safety, there's a lot of these issues that affect men. And, we've had, well, it's currently Parliament's 2/3 men, and it has been as high as 80, 95% in previous years, and yet men haven't been raising those issues. And so I think now you are starting to find that happens more because there is more focus on gender, even if that's initially come through the look at women and girls. So I think that's positive, but I think it's interesting that those issues weren't automatically being raised by men, despite men being the majority of MPs.
And I think men, and especially boys, are used to being fine and putting up that front. And I wonder also whether, over and above the male-female divide, there's the class divide, leave alone the race divide, and surely the class of men in Parliament are used to being fine. I'm guessing that there's a high percentage of boarding school boys. And they may not necessarily know or feel the mental or emotional issues of more impoverished men.
Well, I think there's definitely an issue there about class and income. And social mobility in this country is not what it was, and it never got to how it exactly should be, but it's now been, I think, in decline. And so these are very big issues. What I think is interesting, the one, the kind of mental and emotional stuff, in recent years, I think the general willingness for people to talk a bit more about mental health problems has also extended to Parliament. And we've had a couple of very moving debates where MPs have spoken very movingly about their own experiences, and that includes, in fact, I think more of those have been men who have done so. And so I think maybe this is something which is going to happen more.
Yeah.
So it maybe hasn't happened lots in the past, but perhaps there is a bit of a turning point. But there's also the issue of representation, and I mean, I think again in terms of boarding school, I'm sure that certainly the percentage that went to were privately educated is far in excess of the national average. So there's a lot that needs to be done to make our Parliament more representative of people, up and down the country, in terms of class, in terms of gender, obviously, but also in terms of disability, race, sexual orientation. There's a lot of areas that still needs to change.
And would you say that we are shifting that way? I mean, I'm blown away at how much attention mental health, emotional health, communication, all of this was taboo, invisible, it just no one really cares until relatively recently. And suddenly, partly I wonder whether it's because of people, the royals, the young royals, for example.
They've done a great job.
Absolutely amazing. So many old guys who I know who've worked in the industry have dedicated their lives to this, and they've said, 1 year of the royals has turned it around. On one hand, it's not fair. On the other hand, thank God it's happening.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
And I think it takes that leadership, and I think it's a great example actually of how we've been able to choose a cause that really needed some profile, and probably in a similar way to how Princess Diana talked about HIV and AIDS at a time when that wasn't really fashionable. But just by doing that and giving it that oxygen of publicity, a lot of great strides were made. And I think similarly on mental health, and it's sort of given people permission, and clearly with Princes William and Harry, Duke of Cambridge and Duke of Sussex, to having had their own experience of intense bereavement at such a young age. They talk about it with an authority and a credibility.
And they're so human.
Yeah.
They are so available and so human that it's not doom, but this is my experience.
And it's authentic. It really comes from the heart. And so and that just gives permission to other people to open up about things, because I think that is and again I talk about the stereotypes in my book. You bring up boys, and I've got 2 sons now. and you're sort of aware of the expectations that they have, even at a young age. You know, boys don't cry, and they have to, as you say, be fine.
Yeah.
You know, even if I see my oldest son, you know, fall over, which, you know, 4-year-olds do quite a lot, and you know, and I'll say, "Oh, are you hurt?" And we're going to know I'm fine, as if it would be a problem if he was hurt.
Yeah.
You know, and of course it's okay to cry. You know, and if you're upset, and you sort of you say those things, but the multitude of influences from popular culture and from family and every, you know, all those conversations, everything that they observe is very strong.
Yeah.
And so those messages do still get through in a way that girls are receiving a different set of messages.
Yeah, totally. I feel so lucky. My mother and my family are refugees from Uganda, and we were without my father for quite a long time. We were on the death list. And there was a lot of trauma, nothing we could talk about because we needed to hold it together.
Yeah.
And if we open up about something, someone might crack and it might all fall apart. And my mother, to have the insight to say to my brother and I was 8, he was 5, if you need to cry and you don't want to be seen, then go and lock yourselves in the toilet and take your space and do it there. And what wisdom, knowing that we might need to, knowing that it's normal, and to give us permission.
Yeah.
And I would say that the sad thing about men who come to men's groups or even see me privately is they have 2 main questions. Number 1 is what's wrong with me? And number 2 is how do I do me right? And it's all about handing power, and it's not about the sense of self. Where what I love, you know, the whole man up thing, what I love is turning it into man up and talk about it, because once it's out, then everyone can learn from everyone else's successes and failures, and we're allowed to speak about things, we're allowed to work things through together. And I think, you know, I've still got the old-fashioned, I want to provide, I want to protect, and that's my burden to carry, or that's the thing I should be proud of. Meanwhile, my wife, it's like, hands off. I'm my own person, and you don't need to do this for me. So there's something's changing. Something's really changing, and the power that women have, the power. You know, there's a lot that's said about the inequalities of pay, but I also believe that women are doing so well in so many industries, and things are going in the right way. In so many ways, things are going in the right way. So to end, could you give me 3 tips off the top of your head, at any level, of how to live the change into being, whether it's as a working mother or in society or communication, self-empowerment, whatever works for you?
Well, so I would say in the workplace would be the first thing. I would encourage both men and women to have an awareness, and one of the simplest things you can do is to count. And you can count, you know, who's on your senior executive team. You can count if you're planning a conference, how many of the participants on the panels are going to be men or women. And if you're being asked to go to a conference, you know, you can say, well, I'm not going to do that if I'm going to be the only woman. Or for a man, they can say, I'm not going to do it if it's going to be mainly men.
Yeah.
And indeed, if you're chairing a discussion, you can, you know, again, count and try and make sure you're getting questions from men and women. So counting, and in the workplace, then acting accordingly, whether that's in recruitment or in events that you're putting on. Then I would say sort of domestically within the home, you know, not everybody's a parent, but most people have some contact with children, whether it's nieces, nephews, grandchildren, you know, neighbours' children. The way in which we speak to the next generation and you know, the role modelling we do is incredibly important. And so not making assumptions about what they're going to do. You know, if you're seeing a little boy, not making the assumption that they're obviously into football, and making, you know, seeing a little girl, not, you know, automatically, you know, talking about, you know, how she's going to do her hair and, you know, and her dress. I mean, it's not to say you can never mention those things, but
just give them space to be.
Exactly, give them space to be who they are and to explore and find their own passions and interests, rather than what society sort of says. This is what the channel is for boys, and this is the channel for girls. And then I suppose the final thing I would just say, which is the main theme of my book, is, you know, you have the power to make a difference. So it's about the actions that you choose to make. So use that power. You know, it's important, and every person, no matter how small, you know, no matter how apparently you know, non-powerful you are, everybody can make a difference.
So get conscious. and use your power wisely.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank both of you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you for bearing with us, and you got a little bit happier towards the end.
And you know, it's so great to hang out with you in such an ordinary, human, real way, rather than think, oh, this is untouchable.
Yeah.
And they are so big and powerful, and I'm so small and powerless. No, it's about living it. So thank you so much for spending the time. And good luck with motherhood, bookhood, MPhood, purposehood, the whole lot.
Thank you, Kenny.